Hey guys, this is Toad Brews with the deck tech for you, back on the new laptop in a new year. What we're looking at right here is a control deck built around search for Azcanta and supply and demand, mostly the demand half of this card, which lets you search your library for any multicolored card. So we can find a naturalize effect, an oblivion ring effect, some general good instants. We have supreme verdicts to clear creatures, and we have Assemble the Legion and Kuranos, God of Storms, as finishers. And then we have some late game card advantage spells. And then early on in the curve, we have some removal. We have Blind Obedience, which is one of our primary win conditions outside of these two expensive multicolored spells, which also gives us some life gain and some defense against haste creatures. We have Muddle the Mixture, which finds a search for Azcanta and Blind Obedience. We have Sprout Swarm, which gives us some more creatures. We can use this to block, or we can use it in conjunction with Blind Obedience to generate a bunch of extort triggers if we're left unchecked. We have a couple of cantrips with Opt and Serum Visions. We're not running 4 of either, it's more of a split. We have a couple of small burn spells for small creatures. And we have an Elixir of Immortality, which will let us recycle our graveyard once we're getting through our deck with Search for Azcanta, so we can find things like Sphinx's Revolution and Supreme Verdict again after we've used them. So let's go ahead and look at the sideboard here. We have 3 Relic of Virginities for the Dredge type decks and the Griselbrand Reanimator type decks. We have a Gaia's Blessing, which is less about preventing us from being milled and more to put Elixir back in our deck against the decks that have a way to kill Elixir. We have a Teferi's Moat for the monocolor decks like Soul Sisters that are mostly attacking on the ground. So once we have this in play, if they don't have an answer for it, we just have to deal with the Serra Ascendants. This is also very good against the Goblin type burn decks that are common online and not really common in Pauper. We have another Negate and a Squelch. The Squelch is for Tron to stop Planeswalker activations and Expedition maps. We have 2 Ancient Grudge for Affinity and some versions of Tron, and Lantern because Ancient Grudge is extremely good against Lantern. We have 2 more Blessed Alliance, which is both a life gain spell and a removal spell, so it's sort of a general catch-all sideboard card for matches where we don't want things like Destructive Revelry. They just won't have any targets, so we can bring some of these in against random matchups. We have 3 Timely Reinforcements, which are again for the aggressive red or aggressive Izzet decks that are common online most of the time. And then we have a Counterflux, which is for the bigger decks like Tron and Scapeshift, decks which are doing very powerful things that we can't keep up with incremental advantages from things like Blind Obedience and Search for Azcanta. The mana base is pretty standard for a 4-color deck. We have a lot of fetch lands, a couple singletons of the appropriate shock lands. We also have a Raging Ravine and a Lumbering Falls for creature threat. These are both beefy enough that you can block things like Geist of St. Traft with them, but they're also good at pressuring other control decks. So the Raging Ravine is stronger against the control decks that are using things like Abrupt Decay or Supreme Verdict to control the board that's not really good at hitting a land at instant speed. And Lumbering Falls is for the decks with things like Path to Exile or Fatal Push, which have no problem dealing with cheap threats at instant speed. So the Lumbering Falls hexproof is relevant. We also have a Manamo School at Water's Edge, which, in addition to being an extra blue source, since the deck is a little bit blue heavy, is also a way to untap Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. So if you get to the point where you have a very large amount of mana, we're looking at like 10 mana here, you can double up on Azcanta activations and start grinding ahead very quickly by finding multiple removal spells, multiple draw spells. And finally, if you need to, you can use the supply half of Supply and Demand to generate like 5 or 6 Saprolings And this is mostly to pressure planeswalkers, or if the opponent is already at a low life total from Blind Obedience extort triggers, then a small amount of Saprolings might be able to finish them off even through, say, one blocking Tarmogoyf or something. So that is the deck. I will record some gameplay footage in a separate video.